Poor girl texted the Millionaire CEO by mistake, asking for money to buy baby formula for her twin. Before we dive in, drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notification to see more emotional videos like this. The bitter December wind rattled the thin windows of apartment 4B, carrying with it the promise of snow and the certainty of another freezing night. Inside, 26-year-old Jessie Chen paced across worn carpet, bouncing a wailing infant against her shoulder while another cried from the second-hand crib in the corner. "Sure, Noah, please," she whispered, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "I know you're hungry, baby. I know." 3 empty formula cans lined the kitchen counter like silent accusers. Jessie had scraped the last powdery remnants from them hours ago, mixing them thinner than recommended to stretch what little remained. But now, there was nothing left. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 7:42 p.m. The discount store on Elm Street, the only one she could afford, closed at 9. Time was running out. Jessie laid Noah beside his sister Zoe in the crib, their cries harmonizing into a desperate chorus that tore at her heart. She pressed her palms against her ears for just a moment, allowing herself 5 seconds of escape before reality demanded her attention again. 3 months without steady work. 2 babies depending entirely on her. $0 in her checking account. But tonight, one accidental text message was about to change everything, for the struggling mother of twins and for the solitary millionaire whose empire was built on algorithms and acquisitions, but whose life had somehow remained empty despite it all. 3 months earlier, Jessie had sat in the sterile conference room of Riverdale Memorial Hospital, struggling to maintain her composure as the HR director delivered the news with practiced sympathy. "Due to recent merger-related restructuring, we're eliminating several positions in medical billing. Your last day will be Friday. This isn't a reflection of your performance, Jessie." The severance package envelope felt impossibly light in her hands, 2 weeks' pay for 3 years of service. Outside the hospital windows, spring sunshine mocked her darkening future. She'd walk to her car in a daze, one hand resting protectively on her heavily pregnant belly. The twins were due in less than a month. Her carefully constructed plans, maternity leave followed by a return to work with her mother helping with childcare, had just shattered like glass. That night, she'd called Ryan, the father of her unborn children, hoping against hope that news of her job loss might finally stir something in him. But the call went straight to voicemail, just like the dozens before it. Ryan had disappeared the day after seeing the ultrasound confirming twins. "I signed up for maybe 1 kid someday, Jess. Not 2 at once. Not now." His final text message, the last communication before he blocked her number, still lived in her phone, a reminder of promises broken. The pregnancy had been unplanned but not unwelcome to Jessie. She'd always wanted children, even if the timing wasn't ideal. But she'd never planned on doing it completely alone. The twins arrived 2 weeks early, a boy and girl with perfect fingers and insatiable appetites. For a brief, beautiful moment, the hospital room filled with joy as Jessie held her children for the first time. Reality could wait outside the door for just a little while. But reality proved persistent. Her maternity leave, unpaid now that she had no job to return to, passed in a blur of sleepless nights and mounting bills. The meager savings she'd built over years vanished like morning mist. By month 2, Jessie had established a grim routine. Mornings, nursing the babies while scrolling job listings on her phone. Afternoons, crafting cover letters and submitting applications during precious moments when both twins napped simultaneously. Evenings, calculating and recalculating numbers that never added up to enough. The cruel mathematics of her situation became clearer each day. Childcare for twins would cost more than most entry-level positions paid. Working meant paying for childcare she couldn't afford. Not working meant no income at all. Her kitchen table became a command center for desperate financial strategies. The wedding ring from her brief marriage 3 years before, a relationship that had ended amicably but left her with nothing but the ring, sold for enough to cover 1 month's rent. The designer purse her grandmother had given her for college graduation paid for a week of groceries. Each item sold represented another piece of her former life slipping away. 6 days ago, she'd stood in the bathroom, cutting her own hair with kitchen scissors. Professional haircuts. Like fresh vegetables, full-strength laundry detergent, and anything beyond the absolute essentials, had become unthinkable luxuries. 4 days ago, she'd begun diluting the baby formula, adding an extra ounce of water to each bottle. The sight of her baby still hungry after feeding tore at something fundamental inside her. Yesterday, she'd received the final notice on her electricity bill, the bold red letters warning of disconnection in 72 hours if payment wasn't received. She kept the apartment at 62 degrees, bundling the twins in donated harnesses and wrapping them against her chest for warmth. She showered only every 3rd day, heating water on the stove to wash the babies daily. This morning, she'd stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing how she would ask her cousin for help, her voice breaking each time she reached the part about not being able to feed her children. Pride. That faithful companion that had carried her through foster care, through college as the first in her family to attend, through building a life on her own terms, now stood between her children and hunger. The clock ticked past 8 in the evening as Jessie stared at her phone, the message drafted but not yet sent. Her finger hovered over the blue arrow. She'd composed and deleted the text 5 times already, each version an attempt to sound less desperate than she felt. Outside her window, the convenience store sign on the corner flickered, a reminder that time was running out. The twins had finally fallen into fitful sleep, their tiny bodies exhausted from crying. She hadn't spoken to Ava in nearly 3 weeks, not since her cousin had mentioned possibly helping out when things got better at her own job. That vague promise had felt like a lifeline then. Now it felt like grasping at smoke. Jessie took a deep breath and pressed send. The swoosh sound of the message departing seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet apartment. She set the phone down on the counter as if distancing herself from what she'd just done. Across the city, in the penthouse suite of Blackwood Tower, Dominic Walsh's phone buzzed against the glass surface of his desk. He glanced at it distractedly, fingers still moving across his laptop keyboard as he reviewed acquisition numbers for the board meeting tomorrow. The message preview caught his eye, something about baby formula and money. Unusual enough to make him pause. He picked up the phone, frowning at the unknown number. Not his assistants. Not any of his executive team. Not any of the handful of people who had his personal number. Hey, I hate to ask again, but I'm completely out of formula for the twins. Could you possibly lend me $75 until I get paid next week? I promise I'll pay you back immediately. The store on Elm closes at 9, and I'm hoping to get there before then. Dominic leaned back in his chair, the spreadsheets momentarily forgotten. In 15 years of business, through building his company from a startup in his garage to a Fortune 500 corporation, he'd received countless requests for money. Investment pitches. Charity appeals. Distant relatives emerging from nowhere. But never something so raw, so unfiltered, so clearly not meant for him. His finger tapped thoughtfully against the side of his phone. The rational response would be to ignore it. Or perhaps a quick wrong number reply. Instead, he typed, I think you have the wrong number, but I'm curious, why are you out of formula? He pressed send before he could analyze why he was engaging at all. Jess's phone buzzed with the reply, jolting her from where she'd been staring blankly at the refrigerator, mentally inventorying its meager contents for the 1,000th time. She grabbed the device, hope flaring, then immediately extinguished as she read the first words. Wrong number. Heat rushed to her face. Of course. Ava had changed her number last month after her ex wouldn't stop calling. Jessie had entered it incorrectly in her contacts. Now she'd just shared her desperate situation with a complete stranger. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed an apology, embarrassment warring with the practical thought that she still needed to find formula tonight. She hesitated, then added the brief explanation about losing her job and having twins. No point in pride now. I'm so sorry for bothering you. I meant to text my cousin. I lost my job 3 months ago, right after having twins. Been trying to find work, but it's hard with newborns and no childcare I can afford. Again, really sorry. In his penthouse, Dominic read her response, something shifting beneath his carefully constructed exterior. The wall clock showed 8:17 p.m. If the store she mentioned closed at 9, she had less than an hour to get there. 15 years ago, he'd been the one counting minutes until a store closed, calculating if he could make it across town in time to buy the discounted day-old bread before someone else claimed it. His executive assistant would call what he felt now his street kid conscience, the part of him that never forgot what it was like to be hungry and helpless. No need to apologize. Send me your payment details. I'll help with the formula. He typed the message without overthinking it, a rare impulse in a life now ruled by strategic planning and calculated decisions. Jessie stared at the response, suspicion immediately flaring. Was this some kind of scam? What would a stranger gain from offering to send money for baby formula? Yet what did she have to lose by sending her payment app information? With Noah beginning to stir in the crib, the first warning sounds before another crying jag, she made her decision. That's incredibly kind, but I promise I'll pay you back next week. She added her payment details, then set the phone down, not expecting anything to come of it. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a notification. She opened her payment app, expecting perhaps the $75 she'd requested. The number on the screen made her sink to the floor, knees suddenly weak. $5,000. With a simple message attached, for the twins. No need to repay. She typed with fingers that could barely function, I don't know what to say. This is too much. Who are you? The reply came quickly, just someone who remembers what it's like to worry about the next meal. Get what you need for your children. Jessie pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. The amount would cover formula, diapers, and rent for months. It was salvation from a nameless, faceless stranger who had received her message by pure accident. But who was this mystery benefactor with the ability to casually send thousands of dollars to a stranger? And what might someone with that kind of money expect in return for such generosity? Dominic Walsh set his phone down on the gleaming marble countertop of his penthouse kitchen. The city lights sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, a glittering carpet stretching 60 stories below. He poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old scotch, but the familiar ritual brought none of its usual satisfaction. His mind was 26 years in the past, in a cramped apartment much like the one Jessie Chen likely occupied now. At 12 years old, he had stood in a dark kitchen much like she must have tonight, opening and closing empty cupboards. His mother had been gone for 3 days that time. The final disappearance, though he hadn't known it then. He remembered the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. The dizziness when he stood up too quickly. The shame when his teacher noticed him pocketing half-eaten sandwiches from the cafeteria trash. The state had found him a week later, huddled in that empty apartment with no electricity, surviving on tap water and stolen packets of ketchup. What followed was a blur of social workers, courtrooms, and a carousel of foster homes, some merely indifferent, others actively cruel. By 16, he'd learned that the only person he could rely on was himself. By 18, he'd turned that lesson into a business philosophy that would eventually build Pinnacle Industries. Dominic walked to the window, scotch untouched, gazing at the city below. Somewhere out there was a young mother with twins, rushing to buy formula before a store closed. Using money he'd sent on impulse, an amount that meant nothing to him now but everything to her. His phone buzzed with a new notification. Jessie had sent a message, this one with an attachment. "Thank you doesn't seem enough, but it's all I have. They're finally sleeping with full bellies." The photo showed two infants sleeping peacefully side by side, tiny fingers intertwined. Something tightened in Dominic's chest, an unfamiliar sensation that took him a moment to identify as emotion breaking through the carefully constructed walls of his life. When had he last felt something genuine? His days were filled with board meetings, acquisition strategies, and carefully choreographed appearances. His interactions were transactional, everyone wanting something from the millionaire CEO of Pinnacle Industries. In the 20 years since he'd launched his first successful app, Dominic had built an empire that spanned continents. His name appeared regularly on lists of the world's wealthiest individuals. His business acumen was legendary, his negotiation tactics studied in Ivy League classrooms. Yet his penthouse felt emptier tonight than it ever had before. 6,300 square feet of custom-designed luxury, and not a single photo adorned the walls. No evidence of connection. No trace of being needed by another human being. Meanwhile, Jessie sat on the floor of her small bathroom, door closed to avoid waking the twins. She held the phone to her chest, struggling to process what had just happened. The trip to the store had felt surreal, filling her cart without counting pennies, buying the premium formula the pediatrician had recommended but she'd never been able to afford. Adding diapers, wipes, and even a few small toys the babies could grasp. At checkout, she'd held her breath until the payment cleared, half expecting the money to vanish as mysteriously as it had appeared. But the transaction went through. The cashier had smiled, commenting on how happy she looked. Jessie hadn't realized she was crying until the woman handed her a tissue. Back home, she'd fed the twins their first full bottles in days, watching their eyes drift closed in contentment rather than exhausted hunger. Only then had she allowed herself to wonder about the stranger who had changed their night, perhaps their entire future. She'd sent the photo on impulse, a gesture of gratitude that felt insufficient yet necessary. Then deleted and retyped a question 3 times before finally sending, "Why would you help someone you don't even know?" The reply came quickly, "Because once, no one helped me." In his penthouse, Dominic stared at what he'd just typed. Such stark honesty was foreign to him after years of calculated responses and strategic communication. Yet something about this accidental connection had bypassed his usual filters. His PR team managed a foundation that donated millions annually to various causes. Tax-deductible philanthropy that generated positive press and strategically positioned Pinnacle Industries as socially responsible. But when had he last felt the direct impact of helping someone? When had charity been anything but another business transaction? Would you trust an unexpected lifeline from a complete stranger? And which requires more courage, extending help or accepting it? 3 days after the mysterious transfer, Jessie sat cross-legged on her living room floor, twins napping in their crib, laptop balanced on her knees. The job search continued despite her temporary financial reprieve. She knew $5,000 wouldn't last forever, especially with twins. Her phone buzzed beside her. The now familiar unknown number appeared on the screen. "How's the job search going?" She hesitated before responding. Since that night, she'd exchanged brief messages with her benefactor, mostly her expressing gratitude, him asking about the twins. She still knew almost nothing about him, except that he had once been hungry too. Applying everywhere, but it's challenging. Most jobs want full-time commitment that I can't manage with the twins. Childcare costs more than I could earn. It's a cycle I can't seem to break. She hit send, then returned to scanning job listings that all seemed to require what she couldn't offer, 40 hours a week in an office with no flexibility for childcare emergencies. In his corner office overlooking the city skyline, Dominic Walsh read her message between meetings. His morning had been filled with discussions about Pinnacle's recent acquisition of Meditech Solutions, a healthcare software company that specialized in medical billing systems. The coincidence struck him like lightning. 3 weeks ago, his team had presented the acquisition proposal, highlighting Meditech's remote workforce model as one of its strengths. At the time, he'd barely registered that detail, focused instead on market share and profit projections. "What was your job at the hospital?" he texted Jessie. Her reply came quickly, medical billing specialist. "I also have certifications in healthcare administration." Dominic leaned back in his chair, a smile forming. He rarely believed in fate or divine intervention. His life had taught him that success came from strategy and determination, not cosmic alignment. But this particular coincidence seemed too perfect to ignore. He pressed the intercom button. "Caroline, get me Alan from HR at Meditech. And reschedule my 2 o'clock. 30 minutes later, after a brief but productive conversation with Meditech's HR director, Dominic sent another message to Jessie. "I might know of an opportunity. Remote work, healthcare field. Would you be interested?" Jessie stared at the message, confusion and hope warring within her. What were the chances that her mysterious benefactor would also know about a job perfectly suited to her skills and situation? It seemed too good to be true, which usually meant it was. That would be life-changing. "But why are you helping me?" The twins stirred in their crib, Noah making the small snuffling sounds that usually preceded waking. She glanced nervously at them, then back at her phone as the reply appeared. "Let's just say your wrong number reached the right person. I'm the CEO of Pinnacle Industries. We recently acquired Meditech Solutions. They need someone with your qualifications, and you need flexible work. It seems like a fair exchange." Jessie gasped aloud. Pinnacle Industries. Even as someone who paid little attention to business news, she recognized the name. The tech giant whose founder had become one of the world's youngest millionaires. She texted the CEO of Pinnacle Industries asking to borrow $75 for baby formula. The following week passed in a blur. A formal application submitted. A video interview conducted with Noah crying in the background until Jessie, mortified, had to pause to comfort him, only to find the Meditech hiring manager smiling in understanding, mentioning her own children. Then the offer, a remote position as a billing specialist, flexible hours, competitive salary, and benefits that included health insurance. The email had arrived at 2 a.m., while Jessie was up for the twins' night feeding. She'd read it 14 times before believing it was real. On her first day, Jessie woke before sunrise to prepare. She set up her workspace on the kitchen table, laptop borrowed from the library replaced with the company-issued one that had arrived by courier. The twins' play area arranged nearby where she could see them. At 8:45, she logged into her first virtual team meeting, professionally dressed from the waist up, sweatpants below the camera frame, and the twins miraculously napping. Her supervisor welcomed her warmly. 17 faces in video squares nodded greeting. Jessie felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the confidence of competence, the dignity of purpose beyond survival. That evening, after submitting her first day's work and settling the twins for the night, she sent a message to the number now saved in her phone simply as D. I can't thank you enough. This job isn't just income, it's independence, dignity, and a future for my children. His reply was simple, you earned it. The opportunity was there, you're the one making it work. As she looked around her small apartment that night, Jessie saw it differently. What had been a place of desperation now felt like a beginning. The corner where she'd stood crying over empty formula cans was now her workspace. The table where she'd calculated impossible budgets now held her professional materials. One wrong number. One moment of desperate courage. One person who chose compassion over indifference. Have you ever experienced a moment that divided your life into before and after? As weeks passed, the messages between Jessie and Dominic developed a comfortable rhythm. What had begun as an accidental text evolved into something neither had anticipated, a connection that defied the vast differences in their circumstances. Big presentation today. Nervous but prepared, Jessie texted one morning, 3 months into her new position. She'd been tasked with presenting her analysis of billing inefficiencies to the entire department. They wouldn't have chosen you if you weren't ready for it, came Dominic's reply. Remember, take a breath before you start speaking. Own the silence. His advice, always practical and never condescending, had become a steady presence in her professional development. He never mentioned that he could have easily checked her performance reports as the company's owner. Instead, he let her share her journey on her terms. Jessie had stopped Googling him after the first week, when the search results had overwhelmed her. The business magazines profiling his ruthless acquisition strategies. The society pages speculating about his deliberately private personal life. The financial reports estimating his net worth at $760 million. None of it aligned with the person who texted to ask if the twins were sleeping through the night yet, or who recommended a specific teething gel when Zoe started fussing with her first tooth. In his penthouse that evening, Dominic found himself checking his phone more frequently than usual. Jess's presentation had been scheduled for 2 p.m. It was now 5:30, and he'd heard nothing. He drafted and deleted 3 messages before setting the phone down and forcing himself to focus on the quarterly reports his CFO had flagged as urgent. The familiar numbers and projections that had once commanded his full attention now seemed strangely hollow. At 6:17, his phone buzzed. I did it! They're implementing my suggestions company-wide next quarter. My supervisor called it exceptionally insightful analysis. Thank you for believing in me before I remembered how to believe in myself. Dominic found himself smiling, a genuine expression that felt foreign on features more accustomed to the calculated pleasantness he displayed in board meetings. He typed his congratulations, then hesitated before adding, I never doubted you for a moment. That weekend, as spring finally softened the harsh winter, Jessie took the twins to the neighborhood park for the first time. She settled them on a blanket under a blooming cherry tree, marveling at how they batted at the dancing shadows of leaves. She snapped a photo of Noah laughing as Zoe grabbed for her brother's ear. Before she could second-guess herself, she sent it to Dominic with the caption, First Park Day. They approve. Miles away, Dominic stood at the window of his corner office, supposedly reviewing the Manhattan skyline during a rare weekend at headquarters. In reality, he was looking at the photo of the twins, feeling a strange tug of connection to these children he'd never met. Beautiful day for it, he replied, then added on impulse, I'm working from the office today. View's not as nice as your park. He included a photo of the city spread out 60 stories below. It was the first personal glimpse he'd offered of his world. Jessie studied the image, gleaming skyscrapers and tiny streets, a perspective from heights she'd never experienced. It struck her how different their vantage points were, literally and figuratively. Her view from a blanket on the grass, his from among the clouds. The twins would probably prefer your view. Noah's obsessed with anything tall lately. His favorite word is up. She paused, then added more boldly, "What's it like up there? Peaceful or lonely?" Dominic stared at her question, unexpected emotion tightening his chest. When was the last time anyone had asked him something so simple yet profound? His executive team anticipated his needs, his board respected his authority, his staff feared his standards. But no one asked how he felt. Both, he typed finally. Peaceful when I need to think. Lonely when I don't. He hesitated, then continued, "Your photo has more life in it than anything I've seen from up here." Over dinner that night, gourmet takeout eaten alone at his minimalist dining table, Dominic realized something had shifted. For years, he'd built walls between himself and others, reinforced by wealth and power. The accidental text had created a hairline crack in that fortress. Meanwhile, Jessie bathed the twins in their small tub, thinking about the man in the tower who could buy and sell her building without noticing the cost, yet who took time to offer presentation advice and teething recommendations. The following morning, a delivery arrived at Jess's door, 2 small stuffed giraffes with a note, "Since Noah likes things that are up. No need to thank me. D." She smiled, watching the twins immediately grab the toys. Then a thought struck her with unexpected force. In all their exchanges, she'd never heard his voice. She knew his thoughts, had glimpsed his kindness, but he remained largely a mystery, a benevolent figure communicating through text messages and occasional gifts. A millionaire CEO and a struggling single mother. 2 lives that should never have intersected. 2 worlds separated by far more than the miles between a penthouse and a modest apartment. 6 months to the day after that desperate text message sent to a wrong number, Jessie sat at her desk, a real desk now, purchased second-hand but sturdy, positioned near the window of the slightly larger apartment she'd moved into last month. The twins played in their activity center nearby, babbling their growing vocabulary of almost words. She opened her laptop and began to type. "Dear Dominic, today marks 6 months since I accidentally texted you. 6 months since my lowest moment became the turning point of our lives. I've started this message a dozen times, trying to find the right words, but maybe the simplest are best. Thank you. Not just for the money that night, though it saved us. Not just for the job, though it changed our future. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, at a time when I felt invisible to the world. You gave us more than formula that night. You gave us dignity, hope, possibility, the chance to build something beyond survival. Yesterday, I was approved for a small business loan to start my medical billing consulting service. The banker mentioned how impressive my work at Meditech has been. Little does she know I had the world's most overqualified mentor. The twins took their first steps last week. I've attached a video. Noah still says fup for everything, but Zoe has expanded to mama, no, and something that sounds suspiciously like giraffe. I hope someday you'll meet them in person. They should know the man who changed their lives before they could even remember it. With deepest gratitude, Jessie. In his penthouse, Dominic read the email twice before clicking on the attached video. The sight of 2 wobbling babies taking uncertain steps across a living room floor, falling and laughing and trying again, filled his screen. He leaned back in his chair, something expanding in his chest that felt dangerously close to emotion. His gaze drifted across his immaculate living space, designed by a famous interior decorator, featured in architectural magazines, and utterly devoid of personal touches. No photos. No mementos. Nothing that couldn't be replaced tomorrow. His phone chimed with another email notification. Board meeting agenda. Acquisition targets. Investment opportunities. The business of empire building that had consumed his life for nearly 2 decades. He turned back to Jess's message and the paused video of the twins. How strange that this accidental connection, this wrong number on a desperate night, had provided more genuine satisfaction than his last 10 business deals combined. His fingers moved across the keyboard, composing his reply. Dear Jessie, congratulations on the business loan. They recognized what I saw immediately, someone who refuses to be defined by circumstances. The video is incredible. They've grown so much. Noah looks determined. Zoe seems to be the strategist. I noticed she watches him try first, then adjusts her approach. As for gratitude, it flows both ways. That night, you needed formula. Perhaps I needed something too, a reminder of why any of this matters. My schedule opens up next month after the Tokyo expansion. Perhaps we could arrange that meeting. I'd like to meet the consultant who's about to disrupt the medical billing industry. And her 2 associates, of course. Dominic. He hesitated over the send button, aware that he was crossing a boundary. For months, their connection had existed in the safe space of messages and occasional calls. Meeting in person would make it real in ways he wasn't sure he was prepared for. And yet, the alternative, returning to the careful isolation he'd constructed around himself, suddenly seemed unbearable. He pressed send. 1 accidental text. 2 lives fundamentally changed. A desperate mother found not just financial help but a path forward, independence, dignity, and a future for her children. A powerful CEO discovered that all his wealth meant nothing without connection, that the empire he'd built had become a fortress keeping others out and himself locked in. Sometimes the wrong number reaches exactly the right person. Sometimes a mistake becomes the moment everything changes. And sometimes, the most meaningful connections happen when we're brave enough to ask for help, and when someone else is brave enough to answer. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that unexpected miracles still happen. Subscribe now for more stories that restore faith in humanity and the power of connection. Turn on notifications. Life-changing moments happen when we least expect them, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Remember, behind every struggle is someone fighting a battle we know nothing about. Behind every success is someone who nearly gave up. And sometimes, behind a wrong number is exactly the right person.